is making history as the first gay rom-com ever made by a major studio. And the first where every role is played by an openly LGBTQ actor. Right? And I need you all there in theaters on September 30th because we need to show all the homophobes like Clarence Thomas and all the homophobes on the Supreme Court that we want gay love stories and we support LGBTQ people. And we are not letting them drag us back into the last century.
Oh my God, do you guys remember straight people?
Yeah, they had a nice run. They had a nice run. They had a nice run.
Well done.
With the continuation of the woke-style movies coming out of Hollywood lately, Billy Eichner's Bros has come out and had quite the first weekend box office results to have Billy come to such a bold conclusion on why the results are as they are. The movie cost around $22 million to make, and with the first weekend's numbers covering Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, this movie brought in a total of $4.8 million at the box office. That's it. And let's not forget, as with any movie, there will be a drop-off of viewers following the first weekend results, ranging from people not rewatching it, getting their opinions from reviews, or even word of mouth from friends and family, or just simply have no genuine interest in seeing the movie. And we will get back to that point later. Let's understand something. The production cost was $22 million, meaning that with the marketing and theatrical cuts, the movie will have to make somewhere around $50 million to be in the realm of breaking even, and has to get more than that to be in the talks of actually being considered profitable, no matter how big or small that profit may be. And even if it was profitable, that doesn't mean that the movie was a success, as most consider a successful movie one that could bring in hundreds of millions of dollars past the point of breaking even. Billy is obviously not happy with these numbers, and has decided to take a page out of the Ghostbusters 2016, Elizabeth Banks' Charlie's Angels reboot, and even Viola Davis's The Woman King books, and instead of taking accountability for their failures, because that's obviously just impossible for them to consider that they are the problem, but rather are going to shame the audience into watching the movie and blame them for its inevitable failure. One of the issues that all of these movies have in common is, they're all movies that were advertised in one way very strongly in their marketing, yet when the numbers don't add up, the people that they claim that the movie isn't for are apparently the reason for their failure. Ghostbusters 2016 blamed men because they didn't want to see strong women lead a movie. However, when it came to the actual story of the movie, there really wasn't much to tell at all. The Charlie's Angels reboot told a story of not sexualizing women as they are, and that all of the people in the movie are
independent, successful,
and the story suffered for going in a direction those that liked the franchise didn't care for, showing a true disconnect from why the predecessors were successful in comparison. The Woman King was marketed as based on powerful events, telling of a true story of the Dahomey tribe and women warriors fighting against the slave trade. Yet when people wised up to the actual history of events being portrayed, the backpedaling has come out as, we had to take liberty with what the story was we wanted to tell, when there's an obvious difference in being historically inaccurate versus being historically dishonest. Now with Bros, the trailer indicates that it's not for straight people with
gay sex was more fun when straight people were uncomfortable with it.
And the simple two lines at the end,
Oh my God, do you guys remember straight people?
Yeah, they had a nice run.
selling this movie on the idea that the cast was very representative and inclusive of all the LGBTQ plus community, instead of taking a moment to actually sell the story. This, more or less, comes down to them being in their echo chambers to such an extent to the point of overgassing themselves up too much. Thinking they had more power and influence than they realistically do, believing in just because they get the likes and retweets on Twitter from those who serve no other purpose than to act as though they care, but when push comes to shove, they are the quickest to go on block sprees and refrain from any mature conversation because their little feelings got hurt. Having their heads in each other's asses to the point of having shit for brains to think that they actually deserve anyone's money simply because, as Billy said himself, this movie is the first LGBTQ plus rom-com, but when looking at the numbers,
nope. This shit ain't f***ing adding up, bro.
It's hilarious to think that the once oppressed are now becoming the oppressors ever since being given more power to cancel those with any criticism, especially valid criticism at that, and have to use shame blaming to get their way, as if they were children feeling entitled to something that they otherwise didn't earn or deserve. Looking at those that they say are the blame for the film's failure, generally speaking, straight men don't usually watch rom-coms, and if they do, chances are it's because their wife or girlfriend wants to watch it.
I was watching a little bit of Oprah the other night. I don't really like that show, my girlfriend likes it, and I want to get laid, so, you know. No, you pick your battles.
With straight rom-coms, at the very least, since men are more visually stimulated, they can place themselves into the movie with a character, relating themselves situationally at times, but more so just being in line with what they feel for themselves romantically.
It was just like a visual thing, and you just insert yourself
into the situation. Like when you watch a there's a guy and a girl, but you're not looking at the guy. Even though he's right there, you're just looking at the girl and you're just thinking, yeah, that's what I would be doing to her, right?
With this movie, not only is it taking jabs at straight people, but to try to use the same relatability as a straight rom-com, they wouldn't be able to relate to it the same as if they're straight. They'd only be able to understand the couple dynamic, not the attraction to another man. That, both mentally and visually, aren't drawing them in to have interest in the film, which is perfectly fine. Not everything needs to be for everyone. Now, to speak on the lesbian rom-coms, like I said earlier, guys are visually stimulated, and being that the guys in the audience are straight, the visual takes over more than the mental, keeping their interest in different ways.
So when I'm looking at two dudes kissing, it's like a stalemate. There's no place for me to insert myself into that situation.
To make this movie, which does have its place in entertainment, however niche it may be, and blame those whom you are attacking and or making jokes at the expense of, and feel they need to show up to support something, again, that is doing anything but trying to draw them in, is to say that victims of any situation need to let their abusers go because reasons? That those being bullied should actually feel sorry for the bully and allow them to continue in a manner that is harmful to others. I've seen a lot of entitlement before, but to think that you are owed anything because what? It's a gay movie is ridiculous. Now remember, that was what Billy himself was using as the main selling point of the movie. The main reason that this needs to be successful and why everyone should support it. So for me to criticize it in that manner is playing the exact game that Billy did. But with such a low draw, and I'm sure an even lower weekend performance as this movie continues failing, for him to be this butthurt and to talk down on audiences, especially those who weren't the target audience, is a marketing strategy that has been done a lot lately, but I have yet to see any example where it actually worked. Now let's discuss the ist, phobe, and bigot aspect of their shaming strategy. Remember, even 10 years ago when movies were coming out, and you could see a trailer and think, I'm not really interested in this movie, and nobody at all would bat an eye as to why. I really do miss those days. The phobe definition is centered around the idea of fear, as well as bigot is prejudice against a person or people on the basis of their membership of a particular group. Now, to understand that there are people who won't see this movie or any others like it because they are ists, phobes, and bigots, I understand that and will never fight against that being a possibility for things like this to not be successful. But for the level of which this movie is failing, to blame it all on those people is unrealistic. To have to resort to the shame-blaming tactic shows a lack of faith in a good story, something that the previously mentioned movies also took a part in doing to try to draw in more people to watch their movies. However, when making as niche of a movie as Bros was, for an even more niche, very small percentage of the population, making the majority of the population the butt of their jokes, all while expecting everyone to show up and support it. How is that in any way, shape, or form supposed to make any logical, reasonable, or realistic sense whatsoever? Remember Brokeback Mountain, the Oscar-winning movie from 2005 that got more praise in a time when society as a whole wasn't anywhere near as open-minded and inclusive and representative as it is today? Remember, Billy?
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Brokeback Mountain told a story of two people whom were both lonely and struggling with their own identities and coming to terms with who they were, and they just happened to be gay. It wasn't something constantly thrown in the viewers' faces or made to be this grand idea while downplaying those who weren't gay, but focused on two people trying to find out who they were who happened to meet someone going through a similar struggle. But with Bros, looking at the trailer and how the movie was advertised by Billy himself, the focal points were, it's the first gay rom-com and is all the different cast members filled with different members of the LGBTQ+ community, checking off the diversity, representation, and inclusive boxes before ever touching on the story, for which is supposed to be keeping the audience in their seats throughout the duration of the film. Is that too easy of an example for you to dismiss? Okay, here's a few more. The Happiest Season, a movie that follows a woman who struggles to admit to her conservative parents that she is a lesbian while she and her girlfriend visit them during Christmas. Well, what about Love, Simon? A movie that centers on Simon Spire, a closeted gay high school boy who struggles to balance his friends, his family, and the blackmailer threatening to out him to the entire school, while simultaneously attempting to discover the identity of the anonymous classmate with whom he has fallen in love with online. And lastly, The Birdcage. Armin Goldman is an openly gay owner of a drag club in South Beach called The Birdcage. His life partner Albert, an effeminate and flamboyant man, plays Starina, the star attraction of the club. They live together in an apartment above the Birdcage with Agadar, their openly gay, flamboyant Guatemalan housekeeper who aspires to be in Armin's drag show. All of which didn't have an excuse of straight people not seeing those movies for their box office results, with The Birdcage coming out much earlier than Brokeback Mountain did in 1996, a time with much less acceptance, but still managed to pull in $185 million worldwide. Again, in a much less accepting time in society. Yet Bros couldn't even pull in $5 million worldwide on opening weekend, being shown in more than 3,000 theaters around the world. But as we've been seeing a lot in Hollywood, audiences are getting very tired of the agenda pushing and forced narratives onto those just wanting to be entertained. Taking a look at one of the top companies, Disney, who many of you watching this video I'm sure have grown up watching at least one, if not more, of their movies and loved them, are now getting backlash for the ridiculous pandering to those whom, realistically speaking, otherwise wouldn't care for certain IPs or movies as a whole, but whom voice their disdain for not enough representation, inclusion, and diversity. Yet when that has not only changed, but made such a focal point in the marketing, all in sacrificing the story being told, apparently those screaming for change don't even show up to show that this needs to start happening more moving forward. They just find things to complain about, rage about change, and move on to the next point to make, and never take any actual interest in what they are demanding change of, showing that their only value is in being mad on social media and not taking any further action to actually bringing about change. Look at the Disney remakes, for example. The live-action Mulan was not only a Mary Sue movie, but was filmed outside of a concentration camp, and Disney wants people to forget that. Aladdin was incredibly forgettable, even with Will Smith as a genie, who back then was a very loved actor, and even he couldn't carry the movie towards success. Even the recent Pinocchio release was not received well at all. Lastly, look at the Little Mermaid trailer, as that movie isn't even out yet. Do understand that I'm not interested in which side of the conversation you are specifically on, but rather the point of this example is looking at the like to dislike ratio on the trailer. It's very clear that more people are voicing for not liking the movie than for those whom actually like it. A property under Disney that many feel is the top of the superhero franchises, Marvel, has even come under fire for how Phase 4 has been handled. And for any of you guys that are unaware, Phase 4 is everything that has come out after Endgame aside from Spider-Man Far From Home. From the political agendas with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the Mary Sue of Hawkeye, Thor Love and Thunder with director Taika Waititi and actress Natalie Portman being asked about how gay this movie was, both of them smiling and saying that it's very gay.
Yes, you.
How gay is so gay.
Super gay!
And the LGBTQ+ community not appreciating it as it wasn't as gay as they said it was going to be, which they made sure to include a Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson joke. The Eternals, having so much of the marketing outside of the trailer, having to make sure you know that it has a diverse cast. Also that they had LGBTQ+ and deaf representation. Not that you wouldn't see it in the movie, but wanting to make sure that it's front and center first before anything else. And She-Hulk? I'm saving all of my criticism for this show for a separate video. But to put it lightly, this man-hating, narcissistic, self-righteous show is a complete disaster. Marvel, and Disney in general, were thought to be untouchable and without being able to be criticized for how big they are within entertainment. But with audiences waking up to the woke agenda pushing, viewers are now voicing with their wallets and lack of watch time on streaming, that they don't care for being force-fed identity politics and narrative agenda pushing, as it really shouldn't matter whom you sleep with, whom you are attracted to, or whatever you want to identify as many argue that sexuality is something that isn't chosen, but is what they are born with without their own consent.
He can't help it. That's just how his brain is wired, right? He's just like, and I'm like, right? But there's no hatred in that.
And for something beyond our own control to be seen as more special than how someone else is born as, is the same ideology of thinking one skin color makes one inferior or superior to those of a different skin color. Even the idea of different tones of the same skin color being more or less special or better. Billy falls into that exact same category, for which I'm sorry to apparently have to break the news to you. Just because you're gay, because your film is a gay rom-com, and your cast is all representative of the LGBTQ+ community, does not mean that you deserve more success because of those factors. And shaming people whom aren't interested in your product doesn't make them ists, phobes, or bigots.
How far does political correctness go that I gotta look at some that's making my brain go like, flip away, right? I'm supposed to override that, start like cheering on the relationship, like, woo, grab his ass! Yeah, run your fingers through his chest hair!
Easy way to understand this. If you have a best friend, you may be alike in many ways and even share some common interests, but there are things that you both don't agree on. Things that you may not like the same or even at all. But they're still your best friend and you respect them and support what they're doing, so long as it doesn't infringe on others' rights or well-being. The same could be applied for those Billy is criticizing for not seeing his movie. To not have interest in seeing this movie doesn't automatically make people ists, phobes, or bigots. But they may just generally not have an interest in the product, but they still understand that there is a market for it and people that would enjoy it, despite again how niche it may be. The more niche of a market, the less of people it'll draw in. And that's where the story of this movie isn't even being discussed as a reason people aren't watching this movie. Because despite not seeing it myself, if the makers aren't discussing it, I doubt there really is anything to it, and if there is, it's not being talked about at all. Even when it comes to being an ally, as many of the LGBTQ+ community have been saying for people to be to their cause, even allies can have disagreements on things, but still understand what the overall main point is to focus on. To support what the LGBTQ+ community wants and asks for the rights to be respected, while also not watching this movie because it's not something that the viewer would be interested in, can both exist at the same time and still that person could be an ally for things that matter most. People don't have to watch your movie to support and or understand its existence. Entertainment should not serve as the main point to being an ally compared to supporting one's rights to live. However, it seems lately that if you don't support the entertainment of specific communities, that you don't support them at all. which is not only gaslighting, but a giant fallacy if I've ever seen one. Many straight rom-coms have failed to meet expectations, yet there's no outcry for those outside of straight people being the reason that they failed. There's been movies representing whites, blacks, Asians, Latinos, straights, gays, and everyone else that have both been successful and failures. And in the end, the audience decides on what they want to be entertained by, not just what they want to support or not. And wanting people to support because of identity politics, with anyone giving any form of criticism, no matter how big or small, but rather wanting servants to their cause.
Do you want to go to hell? No. Then stop questioning me.
Sounds more tyrannical than anything else. Billy is learning this lesson the hard way, both mentally and having to come to terms with, just because he puts his male appendage in a different kind of hole than straight people do, as well as he is attracted to men instead of women, does not mean that he is more special and or deserving of their money, because if you don't, you're ists, phobes, and bigots. But they just may simply not be interested in the product, especially if marketed making jokes about the very people whom you feel are the reasons it failed. Billy, repeat this in the mirror every time you want to blame everyone but yourself for your failures. Keywords, your failures.
I'm not special, and I'm not the best. I'm a disaster.
If he cannot come to terms with this, Billy on the Street will be revived again, but not as a TV show.